Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch Break Live with Tea Party Patriots Action. I'm Bill Pasco, Tea Party Patriots man in Washington, and I'll be delivering both the call to action and the Washington report for this week. Let's get right to it. The House and Senate will return Monday and stay in session through Thursday. Last week in the House came back on Monday and took up and passed 3 bills under suspension of the rules. On Tuesday, the House took up but failed to pass a rule governing floor consideration of several bills related to various aspects of cryptocurrency regulation, and, thrown in for good measure, the Department of Defense Appropriations Bill. Then, stuck, the House took up and passed a bill under suspension of the rules. On Wednesday, the House took up the rule again, and this time passed it. On Thursday, the House took up and passed H.R. 3633, the Clarity Act, by a vote of 294 to 134, with 78 Democrats crossing party lines to vote with 216 Republicans. Then the House took up and passed S. 1582, the Genius Act, by a vote of 308 to 122. with 102 Democrats crossing party lines to vote with 206 Republicans. Then the House took up and passed H.R. 1919, the Anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act, by a vote of 219 to 210. The House stayed in session late Thursday night into Friday morning. In a vote series that lasted until 12:45 a.m. Friday morning, the House took up H.Res. 590. That's the Senate amendment to H.R. 4, the Rescissions Act. It passed by a vote of 216 to 213, with 2 Republicans voting against it, Mike Turner of Ohio and Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania. Then the House took up H.R. 4016, the Department of Defense Appropriations Act of 2026. After considering 6 amendments offered by Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, each of which was defeated, and an amendment offered by Republican Congressman Greg Steube of Florida, which was also defeated, the House voted to pass the DoD Appropriations Bill by a vote of 221 to 209. And then they were done. This week in the House will come back today with the first vote set for 6:30 p.m. At that time, the House is scheduled to consider 21 bills under suspension of the rules. On Tuesday, and for the balance of the week, the House will consider at least 5 bills pursuant to a rule. They are H.J. Res. 104, providing for congressional disapproval under the Congressional Review Act of the rules submitted by the Bureau of Land Management relating to Miles City Field Office Record of Decision and Approved Resource Management Plan Amendment. H.J. Res. 105, providing for congressional disapproval under the Congressional Review Act of the rules submitted by the Bureau of Land Management relating to North Dakota Field Office Record of Decision and Approved Resource Management Plan. H.J. Res. 106, providing for congressional disapproval under the Congressional Review Act of the rules submitted by the Bureau of Land Management relating to Central Yukon Record of Decision and Approved Resource Management Plan. H.R. 3486, the Stop Illegal Entry Act, and H.R. 3898, the Permit Act. The House will also consider 3 more bills under suspension of the rules. Last week in the Senate came back on Monday and voted to confirm the nomination of Whitney D. Hermendorfer to serve as U.S. Circuit Judge for the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. Then the Senate voted to end debate on the nomination of Luke Pettit to serve as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. On Tuesday, the Senate voted to confirm him to that position. Then the Senate voted to end debate on and then to confirm the nominations of Anthony Testa to serve as Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, and Joseph Edlow to serve as Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services at the Department of Homeland Security. Then the Senate took up a motion to discharge H.R. 4, the Rescissions Act, in which the president told the Congress he wanted to rescind $9.4 billion in appropriated spending from the Committee on Appropriations. The vote tied at 50-50, with Republicans Susan Collins of Maine, Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska crossing party lines to vote against the measure, requiring Vice President J.D. Vance to cast a tie-breaking vote to advance the measure. Then the Senate took up a motion to proceed to the measure, and the same thing happened. Collins, McConnell, and Murkowski voted no, and the Vice President cast a tie-breaking vote. On Wednesday, the vote-a-rama began after lunch. After considering and defeating 17 amendments and motions to recommit with instructions, over the course of more than a dozen hours that lasted well into Thursday morning, the Senate finally took up and passed H.R. 4, the Rescissions Act, as amended, by a vote of 51-48, with Senators Collins and Murkowski voting against it. The Senate came back into session Thursday in time to vote to end debate on the nominations of 6 Trump appointees for various positions in the judicial and executive branches. And then they were done. This week in the Senate will return today with the first vote set for 5:30 p.m. At that time, the Senate will proceed to a roll call vote on the motion to end debate on the nomination of Terrence Cole to serve as Administrator of Drug Enforcement. Then, based on the Majority Leader's cloture filings, I anticipate we'll also see votes on a motion to proceed to H.R. 3944, the Military Construction, Veterans Affairs, and Related Agencies Appropriations Act of 2026. This cloture vote is expected to take place during Tuesday's session. Then, at a time to be determined by the Majority Leader in consultation with the Democratic Leader, the Senate will vote on confirmation of the following nominations: Joshua Devine to serve as a U.S. District Judge for the Eastern and Western Districts of Missouri. Christian Stevens to serve as a U.S. District Judge for the Eastern District of Missouri. Bradley Hansel to serve as Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. Ariel Roth to serve as Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Communications and Information. And John Hurley to serve as Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Crimes in the Department of the Treasury. Now to investigating Biden. Fox News reported on Tuesday in an exclusive that the White House Counsel's office is investigating former President Biden's use of the autopen, with senior members of the administration saying they are reviewing tens of thousands of documents turned over by the National Archives and Records Administration, NARA. The counsel's office is leading the investigation, but is coordinating with the Department of Justice. One official told Fox News that the White House expects to review upward of 1 million documents. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, both the House and Senate are interested in speaking with members of former President Biden's staff. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer has begun interviewing Biden White House staffers, including Biden's doctor, but so far everyone has refused to answer any questions, instead citing their Fifth Amendment right against incriminating themselves, which of course leads to all kinds of speculation, since no one is talking about any crimes having been committed. And now to President Obama manipulating intelligence. According to Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, the Obama administration, quote, manufactured and politicized intelligence, unquote, to create the narrative that Russia was trying to influence the 2016 election, despite assessments from the intelligence community that stated the exact opposite. On Friday, DNI Gabbard declassified documents revealing what she called overwhelming evidence that demonstrates how, after Donald Trump won the 2016 election against Hillary Clinton, then President Barack Obama and his senior national security team manipulated intelligence to create what would become the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. The documents show that in the months leading up to the 2016 election, the intelligence community consistently assessed that Russia was, quote, probably not trying to influence the election by using cyber means, unquote. But that didn't serve the Obama team's needs. So after the election, under direction from Obama himself, the elements of the intelligence community worked to create a new narrative, suggesting that Russia had worked to corrupt the 2016 election and install Trump as president. Summarizing, said Gabbard, quote, there was a treasonous conspiracy in 2016 committed by officials at the highest level of our government, end quote. Gabbard revealed Friday that she had sent declassified evidence to the Department of Justice. Stay tuned. Now to government funding. House Appropriations Committee Chairman Tom Cole, Republican of Oklahoma, told reporters last week that he anticipated that congressional Republicans would land on a government funding top-line number above the White House request, which, as you may recall, called for spending $163 billion less on domestic discretionary funding in fiscal 2026 than was spent in fiscal 2025. That would cause heartburn among fiscal hawks in the House, many of whom can be found in the House Freedom Caucus. The House has passed 2 of the 12 annual appropriations bills so far, the Military Construction Veterans Affairs Appropriations Bill and the Defense Department Appropriations Bill. The Senate has yet to pass any appropriations bill, but will be taking up the Military Construction Veterans Affairs Bill this week. Now let's talk a little bit more about the rescissions package. Maine's Susan Collins, Republican senator, is a crafty legislator. She had spoken out for weeks about the president's rescissions package, saying she opposed its cuts to the president's emergency package for AIDS relief, PEPFAR, funding. In fact, she made clear that she would oppose the package unless the cuts to PEPFAR were removed. But she never said, at least not publicly, that if they were removed, she would then vote for the package. So, in an effort to win her vote for the package, its Senate sponsors removed the PEPFAR cuts. She was pleased. And then she voted against it anyway. She voted against the motion to discharge the measure from her committee. She voted against the motion to proceed to consideration of the measure. And she voted against the amended PEPFAR cut less package. But it went through the Senate anyway, with Vice President J.D. Vance in the chair to cast a tie-breaking vote. And then, because it had been amended, it went back to the House on Thursday, where it was passed in a late-night vote session so it could be sent to the president for his signature Friday, before the midnight Friday deadline for action. Now to the Iran follow-up. You may recall that in the immediate aftermath of the U.S. airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities several weeks ago, there was a leak of a preliminary battle damage assessment from the Defense Intelligence Agency that suggested that the damage done to Iran's nuclear weapons program was minimal, only slowing the program by a few months. It was all the rage for several days, and CNN and MSNBC played it up prominently. On Thursday of last week, the New York Times reported the following, quote, Iran's deeply buried nuclear enrichment plant at Fordo was badly damaged and potentially destroyed by the 12 massive bombs that U.S. Air Force B-2 bombers dropped on it last month, according to a new American intelligence assessment, end quote. The report continued, quote, 2 other nuclear sites targeted in the U.S. attacks were not as badly damaged, but facilities at the sites that would be key to fabricating a nuclear weapon were destroyed and could take years to rebuild, U.S. officials said, end quote. And then this, quote, the bombings deeply damaged Fordo, considered by the Iranians to be their best protected and most advanced nuclear enrichment site, probably crippling Iran's ability to make nuclear fuel for years to come, end quote. As for the reports that trucks were seen moving near to the Fordo facility in the days leading up to the bomber strikes, leading some to suggest the Iranians had removed the enriched uranium, the new assessment suggests otherwise. U.S. officials believe the stockpile of Iranian-enriched uranium is buried in the rubble of the Fordo site, and, quote, Israeli officials believe that only the stockpile at Iran's nuclear laboratory at Isfahan is accessible despite the strikes on it, end quote. Now to the latest on the Epstein files. Despite President Trump's best efforts, the Jeffrey Epstein story simply will not go away. For 2 weeks now, it has led the news. For the first week and a half of those 2 weeks, the story was simple. Trump and his MAGA supporters were on opposite sides of the issue, with Trump wanting everyone to get over it and everyone in MAGA world not wanting to move on until they knew who was to blame for lying to them about what was in those files. But then, on Thursday night of last week, the Wall Street Journal published a story that ended the schism between Trump and his MAGA supporters. The journal reported that for his 50th birthday back in 2003, Epstein's friends had put together for him a book of what the journal called bawdy letters, and that one of them had been written by his then good friend Donald Trump. Trump denied ever having written such a letter. And even if he had written such a letter, so what? Epstein was still in society's good graces in 2003. He still hobnobbed with the rich and famous and powerful. No one yet knew the extent of his depravity. So why wouldn't Trump have participated? So Trump and MAGA have a new common enemy, the Wall Street Journal, a charter member of the fake news in MAGA's eyes. Trump sued the news outlet on Friday, and the same day, he directed the Justice Department to seek a judge's permission to release certain grand jury information. Stay tuned. Now to the latest on The Jenny Beth Show. Episode 130 of The Jenny Beth Show dropped last week, featuring Jenny Beth's conversation with Dr. Rosalind Layton, a leading broadband economist who talks with Jenny Beth about how outdated spectrum policies and government gridlock are holding back 5G innovation and letting China pull ahead. You'll learn why America's digital economy, national security, and even your daily phone experience depend on freeing up wireless spectrum now. And you'll learn what Congress must do to secure our technological leadership well into the future. As always, it's highly recommended. And that's our Washington report for this week. Now to the call to action. Actually, we're still doing multiple calls to action. There's a lot going on in Congress now, and we need your help on multiple fronts. On the front page of our website at teapartypatriots.org, that's teapartypatriots.org, you'll find a Take Action tab. There you'll find a page with all kinds of detail on different actions we've got underway. We still need your help urging the Senate to move forward and move faster on confirming Trump nominees. And we need your help preparing for our Only Citizens Vote bus tour. Please sign up to let us know you want to help us make the SAVE Act a reality. That's our broadcast for this week. Thanks for tuning in. Please take a moment to share this broadcast with your Facebook friends and post it to your other social media accounts. We'll see you next week. Same time, same place. Until then, be well and be active.